Hi, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. Each week, I like to take a couple minutes and chat about the weekly news in the aquatic industry. Some of you subscribe to receive our weekly newsletter where I list everything that's been happening from new facility projects to legal precedents to industry trends and topics. I'm going to drop a link in the description box down below to the May 7th, 2026 newsletter. That's what I'm going to be chatting about here today, everything that's new that you should know if you are working in the aquatic industry. Let's jump right into it. It's been a crazy week. I don't know about you, but as we get closer and to the May long weekend, which for some of us here in Canada is Victoria Day, for those of you in the US, that's Memorial Day. It is the end of the first full week of May, and as my elderly friend used to say, things are going ahead like a house on fire. So my main focus this week was sharing some feedback that I had from some work that I've been doing recently. I work with lots of different clients, lots of different projects, as some of you might be aware. I do teach the certified pool operator classes, but I'm also actively involved in consulting on new facilities. So new design, new construction, new permits, operating permits, new documentation and compliance. I also work with remedial facilities, so facilities that have been shut down for violations, deficiencies, risk management issues, anything like that. And I do work with facilities in different provinces. So I live in Alberta in Western Canada, but we do work with clients all over Canada, the US, and internationally. We are very selective with who we work with. We don't just work with everyone because we can't be all things to all people. But the long and the short of it is I'm on a big project right now in Ontario, which is very exciting because it is very engaging and different. But anytime you work on a project in another province, it's very, very important as an effective and accurate consultant that we are referring back to building code, operating code, legislation, standards of care in that province, because nobody in a different jurisdiction wants to be told about what they're doing elsewhere. So I'm not going to tell an Ontario pool operator this is what you should be doing if it's not the standard of care in the province of Ontario or in the specific city. I live in Alberta. I do a lot of work in Alberta. The Alberta code comes to mind pretty easily, but the Ontario code also recently changed. There were some changes in 2025. There's always little tweaks. The building code changed a couple years ago. So I have been doing like a deep brain intensive dive into Ontario building code, Ontario pool regulation 565, TSSA, amusement device standard, Life Saving Ontario standards, right? Those of you from lifeguarding know we have certain standards or policy documents, statements. So that has been my life for the last 2 weeks. Probably have another week of it because I'm making a reference document. So I'm doing a very similar exercise to what I would have done in graduate school. I have a master's degree, and in graduate school, you do a lot of research to be able to, you spend all your time researching so that it's faster to write and cite or source what you're writing. So I'm making these reference documents basically for Ontario for myself regarding things like signage, safety equipment, lifeguard ratios, lifeguard positions, first aid kit placement, even specific details like e-stops, emergency shut-offs where they're required for certain equipment. I will have a master document, I'm probably 20 hours into it, with things that I've highlighted, italicized, linked to other legislation. So if somebody says, hey, how many lifeguards do we need on the wave pool? I can speak to many specific factors, or like the depth of the wading pool. Is an attendant required or not? What does that look like in terms of flat water? Anyway, I don't want to bore you with what I'm working on, but my takeaway from that intensive reading to create that document as a starting point for this project is that there are 3 ways I've been thinking about what to tell the client in terms of things that we do, have to do, should do, want to do, etc. And that is what I have titled this week's newsletter. Is it a system? Is it a skill or a choice? Because there's always going to be a system at least in Canada and the US, legislation like building code, pool operating code, electrical code, gas code, plumbing, building safety, accessibility. Then we run into specifics like a skill in a specific case or a specific application or specific people or specific equipment or specific type of business or specific interests. So we have to follow the systems, the structures in the area where the building exists or the business exists, the pool exists. Then we can level up and add in certain specific skill requirements or specific ways of doing things, if that makes sense. They have to be practical. I'm not at that stage yet with that other project. We're still at the building design stage, never mind the operation. Operation is a ways away. And then there's the element of choice. So we have choice in lots of aspects of pool operations. It just may not be as many choices as you have, wall paint or shirt style. When we talk about pool equipment, so let's talk about like pool basin finish for a second. There's maybe 10 choices. Do you want a tile basin, a vinyl or a membrane basin, stainless steel basin, titanium basin, acrylic basin, plaster basin, other type of finish like an eco finish or some sort of other aggregate? Like there's not 50 choices, there's maybe 10 choices, but you do have choices. And I think that's what's really important. I had a consulting meeting with someone the other day, and the client's engineer had not given them any choices on some specific equipment. And I said, well, have you considered this or that? You do have choices. The engineer or the designer, they just picked one thing to make the blueprints. You don't have to go with that. You also may be decision fatigued and you decide to go with that and you don't want to change it, which is fine. But there are endless choices that you can pick from between pool finish, temperature of the water, something like filter media. Here in Alberta, there's really only 3 choices: sand, DE, or cartridge, but you do have choices. There's not just sand. There's rapid rate sand and high rate sand, right? There's beach or playground sand and plastic sand or glass sand, right? Like there are choices. And I think sometimes I've talked about this topic a lot in many different aspects of the newsletter and CPO class. There's rules we have to follow. There's standards we should follow. But then this week I've been thinking, is it part of a system we have to follow? Lifeguard system, building system, operating system? Or in our case, is it a specific skill or choice that we make in terms of business practice? I don't want to overcomplicate it. I don't think it's like, this is not a PhD thesis. This is just, I'm always looking for tools that helped me to help you. And I think that is something that I think, compartmentalizing the structure can sometimes help us zoom out of the what it is or the why we do it. One of the other questions I talked about in this week's newsletter was a perennial question I get as a certified pool operator instructor is, why does the CPO certificate expire? Does it expire? Do I have to retake the class? And this is such an individualized question. That's why it's hard to put into 1 or 2 sentences. So I've had people say to me, well, you're making me retake the CPO class because you make more money. That's not why I'm saying this. There are many elements of certified pool operator training where it does depend on your job description, your organization that's hired you, your HR requirements, your union requirements, your position requirements, your facility operating requirements, business requirements. It may be a component legislatively of your jurisdiction. There has to be somebody CPO certified, either on staff, employed in the building. It does depend on where you're based. Every Canadian province or US state has different requirements for CPO training. The length of the training, the providers of the training, the testing, the accreditation of the training. And then, yes, some provinces or states do consider the pool operator class a lifetime award. You do it once and you don't have to do it again necessarily as a regulatory requirement. right? Same as, let's say I'm 16 years old and I go to a driver's education course. Once I achieve my full driver's license, I have to pay fees to update my license every few years. And maybe when I turn 75, I have to do another test, but I don't have to retake the education or the road test again. I'm done since I was, 18 or 19. The certified pool operator class, though, is a minimum standard of care in some jurisdictions to show some competency. As I've said before, I've had great students who were terrible operators and great operators who were terrible students. So I would never suggest that a piece of paper or a training class in a very artificial classroom setting is sufficient on its own. The same way you can do very, very well on a written driver's test and poorly drive on the road, or do very, very poorly on a driver's test and do very well on the road. So the main point I wanted to make is the certified pool operator certificate from the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, it does expire after 5 years and 30 days from the date you write the CPO test. So if you didn't pass the first time, it's not associated with your class dates, it's associated with your retest date. You'll get a digital certificate. It's available to download. You can access at any point from the Prometric document portal and send that to your health inspector. Pool and Hot Tub Alliance says that they send out one reminder to PHTA CPOs that their certificate is expiring. Lakeview Aquatic Consultants, we endeavor to send out one reminder, but even, for example, today I'm behind. It's May 2026, and I need to send out expiries from February, right? I get busy. It doesn't happen. It's something we need to outsource in the future. But the main point I want to make is whether or not you should recertify your CPO is an individual, either personal or professional decision that comes down to, is it required as part of your job or facility, or is it a good idea professionally to go back and have some remedial training? Something like first aid training, in many jurisdictions, it's legislated by the state or province at an interval of every 2 to 3 years. In some key industries, like heavy industry, the medical profession, like dental hygiene, nurses, doctors, et cetera, they have to keep retaking CPR irrespective of more advanced training because it's considered a perishable skill. Pool operations is a perishable skill. And I'm not suggesting that those of you working on pools day to day forget everything. But as you move up into more management roles, away from the deck side, or as you standardize more procedures, you may start to forget some elements that are covered in the pool operator class. And so whether or not you do need to retake it is personal, professional decision. The main point I wanted to make is that in some jurisdictions, it absolutely is considered expired by the state or province or by the health authority, the inspector, in alignment with the date assigned on the certificate. Okay. And if you lose your certificate, the PHTA does not reissue expired certificates. We're fully aware that there are people who might try to falsify, Photoshop, Canva, whatever, update their certificate so it's not accurate. And then also there's just the realism that, I forget things. Like, ask me about something from 2020 and I don't necessarily remember. You can take the CPO class with me. You can take it with any other Pool and Hot Tub Alliance accredited instructor. You can go to phta.org. You can select the certified pool operator menu from the top under education and then find a class. You can select in person or online. You can search by state or province or country. You can search by time frame. You do you. There's in person, there's online, there's CPO Fusion. We're starting to offer more CPO Fusions here at Lakeview because I recognize for people for whom this is their second or third recert, they want to do 8 hours of modules on their own. They don't want to spend 16 hours with me. We are going to be adding here another CPO Fusion in June because our May class is already sold out, and that's it's already only early May. So we're going to add a CPO Fusion in June. And we're also adding a CPO class in the town of Canmore, Alberta, coming up here in September. That was just discussed over the last couple of days. The last few things I want to mention in the newsletter, I did share an incredible campaign from the YMCA in the United States. It says phones down, eyes up, right? So phones down, eyes up on the pool, kids, supervision, water watcher, right? That's a huge issue. Those of you who are lifeguards, we've experienced this with parents and guardians. Phones distract people. from their purpose if they're intended to be watching the pool. I am going to do a quick run through of some of the aquatic industry news this week. No huge trends come to mind this week, as we know with the ebb and the flow of the news cycle. So, for example, I would say last week we were talking a lot about Camp Mystic, and in the 24 hours after I sent the newsletter last week, Camp Mystic in Texas decided not to reopen for summer 2026. But it's been a week, right? People have moved on. So let's talk about some of the news stories. I think that going forward, especially if you're listening to this recording in the future, some news stories that actually matter. So I led this week with a lawsuit, which is unusual, but I was feeling a little bit cheesed myself because I just had an incident the day before with somebody who did not take accountability for responding to an email. Like I was following up on an email from 2 months before. So this was front of mind. Landmark Aquatic, which is a pretty big commercial builder, service company, supplier in the US, they are suing one of their municipal clients. I believe it was in association with a spray park or a splash pad. They are claiming approximately $650,000 in unpaid work on a project. And the municipality is making a whole bunch of allegations that about, like, I'm not going to relitigate what's listed in the news article, but I don't know anybody at Landmark Aquatic. It's not like a personal thing, but I fully believe what they're alleging the municipality did, because it is so common in our line of work, consultants, that people just don't read, don't respond, don't reply, don't acknowledge. They take zero personal responsibility. And I was discussing this with someone at dinner last night, because they perceive they are the client and we are the service provider. We should have an unreasonable, a higher than 50-50 share of responsibility. They think as a supplier, we should do this. We should do more communication. We should be more responsive. We should do all the work. We should take on all of the risk, and etc. And I'm not here to rant or complain, because I am a service provider and I do want to give our guests or customers the best experience. But I've also seen clients that just don't reply, don't respond. And so without knowing any more than what's presented in the article, I can absolutely believe that Landmark Aquatic kept following up, did certain things, asked for certain approvals, sent contracts, and not on purpose. It might have just been through a patchwork of poor communication or teamwork or delegation or leadership. Stuff didn't happen the way it was supposed to. And that takes time. I was on a project recently. I think I spent 12 hours following up with the client about the project before they said they would sign the contract. And then it's been another 4 or 5 weeks that they haven't signed the contract. And it would be unprofessional of me to not start the work, but also, do I provide the completed work when they haven't signed the contract? It can get really thorny. So I feel for Landmark Aquatic, because nobody wants to sue a client, but I can absolutely see where this went downhill. I did share an article pertaining to Camp Mystic's decision not to reopen in summer 2026. That came on the heels last week of public testimony in the Texas state legislature. Really, really terrible testimony that I think compelled them to realize that they needed to back down. I don't think that this is, them doing the right thing finally. I think this is PR damage control team at its finest, and that they are only backing down under the direction perhaps of their lawyers, insurers, PR consultants. There's litigation, there is civil proceedings, probably criminal proceedings in the future, depending on what they find. That's just my opinion. As one of the commentators I follow was saying, let's not laud them for being good people. They should have done this 9 months ago, 8 months ago. So it's an awful situation. I will continue to follow it because I think there's a lot of takeaways for aquatics. We're picking up on the ongoing saga with the Fontainebleau in Miami. They want to add some water slides, and the city board is not having it. There's a lot of drama there. Shared a resource from National Fire Chiefs Association talking about drowning rates in and around bodies of water with people who never have any intention of swimming. I would say generally, even within the aquatic industry, but also outside of the aquatic industry, there's this general misconception that intend to swim are people who drown. When, for example, one I read yesterday was a woman who was intoxicated. She fell while walking her dog and her head somehow got lodged between some rocks, like a breaker or a shoreline, and she couldn't get her head out and she drowned when the surf came in. Really terrible situation, but you're walking your dog, you have no intention of swimming. Or walking by a canal, or, the common one I see with workplace fatalities is like somebody driving a lawnmower that flips over into a retention pond or a body of water or a water feature on a golf course. Like none of those people had any intention of going swimming. The city of Fort Lauderdale has announced the development of what they're describing as the Water District, a $200 million waterfront development around the International Swimming Hall of Fame. This is going to be really awesome. If you haven't been to Fort Lauderdale recently, the International Swimming Hall of Fame had a big renovation, a big expansion a couple of years ago. I had the opportunity a lifeguard let me in so I could see the property last fall when I was in Fort Lauderdale for the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance CPO instructor school. And it's just a couple blocks away from the beach, but it's also just a couple blocks away from some residential areas, lots of shops and cafes. And it will be really interesting if they make this into a cool water district that bridges the beach and those pedestrian areas. It's a really fun area of Fort Lauderdale. Shared some resources pertaining to programming for Muslim guests at water parks. I shared an article about we're having issues with swatting or teen takeovers at water parks in the US. That has not reached us yet in Canada yet, but it is something as a trend I think we need to be aware of, that there are young people as we head into summer without structured days, with time on their hands, with phones, the virality of having a moment on TikTok. I know the big one this week I was reading about that I hadn't seen, but just was reading about young people running through the churches of Scientology in California and taking videos that go viral for TikTok. So anytime there's any sort of viral challenge or something that could do well on the algorithm, there's going to be young people there to try it. The Kitsilano pool in British Columbia is back in the news as well. A related article, the city of Vancouver mayor is pitching $400 million reinvestment into local community centers for capital construction and repair. Both of these projects, I mean, they're talking that the Kitsilano pool is going to take $40 million to keep it running. We are in an infrastructure crisis. You've heard me say this before. I'm sorry to keep repeating myself, but some of these 40, 50, 60-year-old facilities, these urban facilities, sometimes poorly constructed or maintained facilities, $400 million is barely going to scratch the surface, unfortunately. Like, it's a good intention, but it's a small Band-Aid on a big bullet hole, so to speak. Kind of like when we talk about public infrastructure in the US, like the bridge crisis, so to speak. I'm still sharing some articles about Aqua Arabia. I think we're going to keep hearing about this facility for a while. It is such a spectacular facility. I can't wait to see it, hopefully within the next year. I shared an article regarding, unfortunately, yet another, this time elderly cruise ship passenger drowned recently while allegedly snorkeling at Great Stirrup Cay. I know this is going to be really frustrating for the Starguard Elite team and the lifeguards there. They do have lifeguards, and often there's other complications. You just have thousands of guests arriving on a cruise ship. And I'm not trying to make any specific allegations about this guest, but speaking broadly as a frequent cruiser, people are dehydrated. They've been drinking. They've been living it up on vacation. They may be exhausted. They're not following their normal routine in terms of nutrition or fitness. Maybe they're taking intoxicants. Maybe they have medical complications based on age or other conditions. And so I know it's really frustrating for the guard team when these things happen. And then people say, well, why wasn't the lifeguard there to save them? And it was often a medical complication in conjunction with the environmental conditions like surf or waves or snorkels or other sort of breathing, not conditions, but complications. I shared a chemical spill at a Lifetime Fitness in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've talked a lot about chemical spills and chemical exposure this year with the Canmore Inn and Suites incident. I shared a couple of good news stories associated with the City of Austin pools, Coconut Grove in Florida, one of their pools, and then an ongoing conversation we've been having regarding smart glasses, because these are an ongoing issue, not just at aquatic facilities, but recreation facilities, private facilities. How is that going to impact our day-to-day work for those of us who are working out with the public? So a little bit of a shorter newsletter this week. I'm also kind of behind on YouTube. Life has been lifing, deadlines have been deadlining, still short-staffed. So I do appreciate your patience. A lot of CPO registrations this week. Also a shorter video to catch you up, but I am on track to see you same time next week with our weekly newsletter and this video recording. So thank you so much for sticking it out. Thanks so much for being here, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.